Reports are that the Indianapolis Colts are going through a third round of interviews for their head coaching job. Are they even going to have a head coach before the NFL draft? Well, hey, let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle podcast presented by Fan Nation on SI.com. My name is Andrew Moore, and I'm joined here by my co-host and fellow writer at Horseshoe Huddle, Drake Wally. Drake, I honestly thought, hey, maybe we'd get lucky. Maybe tonight's episode, we'd be talking about a new head coach for the Indianapolis Colts. But it looks like we're going to have to go into a fifth week of this. How you doing, man? What are your thoughts on what's going on? How's life in Drake's world?
Life's good. It's almost the weekend. But I really figured that we'd be, in jubilation over the final round. But absolutely not. No, I definitely think, hey, it's good to see that it's not a kind of like I mentioned a knee-jerk reaction to pick somebody, but man, it's like, when are you going to get it done? When are you going to pick the guy? So I'm just excited to talk about it, excited to see you. So yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot tonight. We're going to talk about what this third round of interviews means, who the guys might be that are in that third round, and then, of course, what's been happening all week, the Senior Bowl. So we're going to talk Senior Bowl. We're going to talk some NFL draft stuff tonight. I know you guys want to do that, but first, let's give a shout out some people already in the chat. Nathan, you've been on and waiting for a while now, buddy. Thanks for joining us tonight. Quentin says, I hope that they find someone soon. Hey, I think we all do, Quentin. We're all ready to have a new head coach for the Indianapolis Colts so we can talk about who it is, the staff they're going to assemble, and then we can move on to the fun stuff, to the NFL draft. And then Stats Matt, who I was talking to him earlier, and he said he wants us to have a third show in the week when the Colts announce a pick. So thanks for that, man. But is it draft time yet, buddy? I wish it was. I really wish. Stormy saying, good to see you, fellas. Love your podcast. Thank you, Stormy. We appreciate all the support. We're going to dive right into it. But first, you guys, right before the show, I was going to say, hey, who's going to be our 500th subscriber on this show? But someone did it. Someone subscribed right before the show, and we're up to 500 subscribers on the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. We really, really appreciate it. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that little bell so you know whenever Drake and I are going live, because I promise you, breaking news, the Colts are going to announce a head coach at some point, and we will be live that night. But if you already done that on YouTube, go ahead and look at the bottom of the screen, scrolling right by you. Like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow Horseshoe Huddle on Twitter at Colts on FN. Make sure you've got all of that intact and all of that done, and then you don't have to worry about it ever again. Steve saying fingers crossed, but seriously starting to worry. Well, Steve, we're either going to flame that worry or we're gonna settle you down a little bit tonight. So Drake, let's dive right into it. So reports are from NFL Network's Ian Rappaport and Mike Garafolo, two guys that I really trust in the industry and are right almost every single time, are reporting that the Colts are not opposed to entering a third round of interviews for their head coaching position. They started out with 13 interviews in the first round. They narrowed it down to 8 in this second round. And then now it looks like they are probably going to go to a third round of quote unquote finalists for their head coaching job. So Drake, I think a lot of Colts fans just want to know, after all of these interviews, with the first round being close to 4 hours on Zoom, the second round being sometimes 11 to 12 hours, where the guys are in the facility outside of Shane Steichen, who the Colts are flying to and are going to interview because he's prepping for a Super Bowl. But is this third round actually needed? What do you say? How can you justify this third round happening when it's, as Ian Rappaport said, it's unprecedented? Then a franchise would have to go through a third round of interviews to find their next head coach.
Well, actually, it was Nathan Comanci here in the comments that just beat me to it. But Chris Ballard said that he totally was fine with this happening before it ever even happened. Okay, now I actually just wrote a piece that said I thought he was bluffing, and I thought that that's just something that you tell the media. Seriously, like I was like, oh, By February is what he really means. Oh no, he's not kidding. Once I saw that Aaron Glenn was put in for a second head coaching interview, a guy that I don't think has really been a high on many teams, let alone a second interview. I was like, okay, all right, Ballard is not kidding around. I was surprised at first, but then I thought to myself, his job's on the line. He's getting a rookie quarterback for the first time. He's getting a new head coach. There's a lot of things happening that Ballard has not seen before, and he's really valuing his job and wants to stay in Indy. So I think that he is just dotting all of his I's and crossing all of his T's right now.
Right. And I'm going to bring up Nathan's comment here. Said Ballard said it first. This coaching search could go well into February. I hope Morris is the man. Keep Bradley as defensive coordinator. So, and he did. I mean, Chris Ballard said in his press conference to end the year that doesn't care what side of the ball, and they're going to take their time and make sure that this is a consistent and thorough search. And he doesn't care if it goes into mid-February. It's about getting the guy right. And really, they do still have all their options. I think what would be the biggest catastrophe is if they waste all of these guys, all of these candidates' time, and they still go out and hire Jeff Saturday. But I don't think that is going to happen. So I think we are good there. But it's just really hard to fathom, I guess. And of course, we've never been through an interview for a head coach in the NFL. We don't exactly know what all happens there. But after spending, like I said, 4 hours normally in the first interview over Zoom, and then another sometimes 11 to 12-hour interview at the facility, there's really how much more information can you glean from these guys at this point with a third interview? To me, it just doesn't, it seems almost redundant. Not really exactly sure how much you can really gain from that third interview, and what exactly the Colts would be looking for in that sense.
When you look at it from the other side and you mention all the time that goes into those first two interviews, one of two things come to mind for that third interview. Either one, they're just kind of like, so we've talked. Go ahead and give us your final statement. That's the only thing I can say. Give us your reason right now in 2 sentences why you should be the coach of this football team. Go. That's the only other thing I can think of. Or, which would be terrifying, is that Ballard and Irsay and co don't know who the hell they want. That right there would be concerning this deep. It's one thing if you don't know who you want at the presser. You know what I mean? But when you're in your going on third round of interviews, wow, you're going on 15 hours potentially at that point of interview time. And what else can you say other than give me your final statement? So it's one of two things. Hopefully it's just that they're combing everything, turning over every stone, and just making sure every detail is not missed. That's what you just hope if you're a fan.
And I like this by Wyatt Law. Good to see you, man. To go a third round, who is actually needing convincing they found their guy? Aren't 12-hour second interviews enough to get a feel for a candidate? Is it Irsay or is it Ballard? So I can't answer that last question for you, Wyatt. It is Chris Ballard that's leading the search, because I'll tell you what, if it was Jim Irsay leading the search, there wouldn't be a third round of interviews.
Maybe not even a second.
We'd probably know who the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts was by now. So it is Ballard, and he is being thorough. Like you said, Drake, he is fighting for his job, and he wants to make sure he gets the right guy. Steve, I'm with you, buddy. How did they ever let Callahan walk out yesterday? Buddy, I was praying. I even tweeted it out that yesterday was a fantastic day, a beautiful day, in fact, for the Colts to offer Brian Callahan the job. I would have been so happy about that. And then Stats Matt coming with the logic here. It's reported, so my thing is maybe it's being talked about if Shane Steichen comes neck and neck with Morris and or Callahan, then they might have a three-way tie. And that's generally what the thought is right now. The thought is that for that third round, there's probably not going to be, I know some people kid online that it's going to go from 8 to 7, but it's probably going to be the two to three candidates that get that final interview. We already know how well Raheem Morris's interviews have gone. The Colts really like Brian Callahan. I know that for a fact. And Peyton Manning's voice carries a lot of weight in that building. And Peyton Manning is one of the biggest advocators for Brian Callahan. And then Shane Steichen, who the Colts, like I said, are flying out to Philadelphia tomorrow. Or I'm sorry, Saturday for his interview, since he is prepping for the Super Bowl and they're going to be leaving for Arizona on Sunday. So I do think that it is Morris and Callahan are definitely the two favorites, and if Steichen gets that, can get right up there as well, then you might be able to see a third round of interviews. Uh, Even though the Colts wouldn't be able to speak with Steichen until after the Super Bowl, or maybe that it is that close between Morris and Callahan, and they just want to talk to each one of them one more time. I don't think it's going to be a long list that gets third interviews if they do happen. I really think it's going to come down to 2 to 3 guys that they just want to speak with maybe one last time, and it doesn't have to be another day long interview. Maybe they just want to speak with them real quick and get some last minute details. But I do think we're going to see true finalists if there is a third round of interviews.
Yeah, that's gonna. It's. You just hope to goodness that it's not gonna be another 2 hours or even over an hour. Make it 20, 30 minutes. Make a synopsis of the previous two interviews and just ask them to elaborate on everything as a whole in a couple sentences as to why they should be the coach. There you go. You have all the, just like Wyatt mentioned, you have all the info you need. I was going to say, this is how Colts fans feel. I want to quote a tweet from our own Zach Hicks that when I read it, it actually made me laugh incredibly hard. He said, and I quote, Colts are going to announce Reggie Wayne as their new head coach on April 10th. So that right there is how Colts fans feel. And the joke is he hasn't even had an interview. So it's kind of funny, but that's really how a lot of fans do feel. They're like, why do we need 8 second rounders? And then you're going to cut it down to potentially 2 or 3. Maybe they don't have a third round. Maybe they're just impressed by Callahan or Morris and they're trying to delay it for Steichen. Who knows? There's just so many question marks right now, but the tension is definitely high for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I like this question by Dabney. Knowing the coaching search is going to last to the end of February, does the longer it goes help or hurt Jeff Saturday? Honestly, I don't think it really matters because the Colts have so many candidates that they at their disposal that and especially from the report from Zach Kiefer of The Athletic, who's very plugged in down there in Indy. The Colt Jeff Saturday is not a likely candidate. We know he's not going to be the one of the candidates that Ballard recommends. So unless Jim Irsay just isn't impressed by any of the 13 candidates that they have interviewed so far, I don't think Jeff Saturday is going to get the job. I really don't. And with there only being 2 head coach openings out there, one of them is the Colts. It's not like that the Colts are going to lose out on all of their candidates. Could they have to, if they wait too long, are they going to miss out? Maybe Brian Callahan, he was interviewing out in Arizona today. Are they going to lose out on him? They might, but Raheem Morris hasn't interviewed any with them. Shane Steichen hasn't. Ejiro Evero hasn't. I know Rich Bisaccia hasn't. Wake Martindale. So a lot of the guys that they have brought in as finalists, they haven't interviewed with the Cardinals. So I don't think it really hurts or hinders. What say you, Drake?
I agree 100%. I mean, the thing is, you have to try, and this is just some advice for me, is if you want to know about real Colts updates, follow the local media in Indianapolis. Follow the
Mm-hmm.
media that literally has their heartbeat or has their hand right on the heart of the Colts, not first take or anything that's like a third, you get the third piece of information at that
Not
point.
any of Jeff Saturday's ESPN buddies.
Yeah, avoid
I'll tell
avoid
you
all
that.
those.
I'll tell you that. But Stats Matt says I do think Saturday is realizing he's slipping down the ladder with his recent social media comments. So yeah, I mean it is kind of true that he isn't no longer seen as a favorite, and people are realizing that. Unboxing Mania says the Colts need to get an offensive-minded head coach to pair with their quarterback pick, and that's why I think Steichen and Callahan are the favorites with Morris, because Morris also has coaching experience on the offensive side of the ball. Excuse me, and could put together a fantastic staff. Marvin Fox asks, is it possible one or more have turned down coaching offers? I think if that's the case, I think that we would have heard about it by now. They would have been reported that they have bailed out and they no longer want to be considered for the job. But none of the candidates have done that so far, outside of Ben Johnson, who declined on anybody, went back to Detroit, and Dan Quinn going back to Dallas. So I don't know, Drake. Does that make sense? Do you think any of them have really turned down any of the coaching offers, and that's why this is taking so long?
I agree with you. I don't think so because you would have definitely heard about it. I mean, you heard because the team that quote unquote has them currently, if they go back to that team is going to post it right away, kind of like they did with Quinn and kind of like Ben, the Colts did with Ben Johnson right away. They were like, he's decided to go back to Detroit. I did notice something here. I'm trying to, oh, here we go. From Rich Wheeler. He goes, the longer it goes, the more I see Steichen as the front runner. I saw that, and that's interesting because it's like they are flying exclusively out to Philadelphia. Granted, he is having a Super Bowl, which is rare, for a coaching candidate to have to interview in that kind of sense. So it's like I'm they must be high on Steichen if they want to fly out to visit him, make sure that he's comfortable in his own scenario and interview him different than the other candidates. I was kind of curious to get your opinion on that. It's a different interview than the others.
I think it's completely based on the fact that he's preparing for a Super Bowl. I really do. If the Eagles season was over, Steichen would be at Indy, but the Colts are probably Steichen probably requested that could happen. The Colts are gracious enough to oblige. It's not a very far flight from Indianapolis to Philly, maybe an hour and a half. I'd say some 2 hours. It can't be that long. So they're going to fuel up Jim Irsay's jet, take it out there, and so that way Steichen doesn't have to take away his attention by traveling for that day from the biggest game of his life. So I don't think it necessarily means he's a favorite, but I do think it shows that the Colts really want to get that interview with Steichen done. So I think they are very, very strongly considering him for the head coach. Steve asks, I wonder if any of the candidates will drop out if they view this as dragging out too long, and I do think that is something that could be a factor. I mean, if they feel like they're just being strung along with this, they might say, like, this isn't worth it. I my future can't be played with like this, and they may take their name out of it if they see fit. Nobody has done that so far, but we'll have to see. And then stats map for anybody that wants to know, Pagano and McAfee today on McAfee's show went over some questions that happened in coaching interviews, and it was like the last 15 minutes of the show. So if anyone wants to check that out, I'm sure that would help give you a better insight into what's going on. So it's very interesting. I'll say that, especially because we haven't really seen a third round of interviews from any other team. It doesn't seem like the Colts are in a hurry to choose a candidate. I would be personally very bummed out if the Cardinals were able to steal Brian Callahan away from the Colts because the Colts were taking too much time, but when we look back at this, I don't think we really should be all that surprised because Chris Ballard even said that they are going to make sure this is a thorough search and they want to get this right. And we've talked about it all off season on this show ad nauseum that the Colts, this is the most important offseason the Indianapolis Colts have had in 25 years. And if they want to make sure that this doesn't mess up the franchise for the next 5 years, they need to get the head coach right, and they need to get the quarterback right. And when we're looking back at this, and if they got the head coach right, we're not going to care how long it took, as long as they get it right.
Yeah, and you got to think it's a two-step process, and one has to happen before the other. And the first step like changes how you're going to decide the second. So whoever they take at coach is going to ultimately decide who they take at quarterback. I think
Mhm.
because it's such a diverse group. Even with the four, they each have dynamic traits that stick out right away, and so each one you've seen articles that we've even posted. That pair a guy. So I mean, they have to think extra hard about this because they're not just saying, okay, we've got a quarterback that's in his second year out of his rookie contract. We just had to fire a really terrible coach, kind of like with Trevor Lawrence. No, you're not getting that. You're picking an entirely new quarterback to pair with an entirely new coach. They're both going to be doing it for the first time in the NFL, potentially, unless it's Raheem Morris. But like Man, it's a really difficult decision. So while it is so frustrating, it's understandable and it's justified as well, especially after the ridiculous year that happened.
Right. And I want to touch on this real quick before we move on. But JB says, hopefully Sirianni isn't poisoning the mind of Steichen. I have a bone to pick with Sirianni for his reaction to beating us. Well, number one, on Sirianni's reaction, I've seen a lot of people say that, but hey, if the Colts, if people didn't want that reaction to happen, the Colts should have beat them, and the Colts had the lead pretty much all game, and they should have beat the Eagles. So I don't really have any qualms with Sirianni reacting the way that he did because the Colts had just fired Frank Reich. He's a guy that he loves, a mentor of his. He's going to be have that kind of reaction. And if you don't want that reaction, hey, Colts go out and actually do the job on the field. But I don't think Sirianni is quote unquote poisoning the mind of Shane Steichen because a lot goes into these coaching interviews. And if that was going to happen, Steichen wouldn't be wasting his time and having a pretty much day-long interview with the Colts before the Super Bowl. If that was the case, he would have just flat out denied the request and wouldn't be interviewing them.
Yeah, and you wouldn't have had, kind of like you said, you wouldn't have that second interview happening. And plus, you have to put into context something. Frank Reich was fired over the phone mid-season, okay, and replaced by a guy who has no idea what he's doing. So yeah, I mean, I understand. I was very emotionally charged when Sirianni did that, but that's a guy who loves Frank Reich. He was kind of wronged in a way. Everything's in the past now, but I really do think that Steichen is a very high candidate for the Colts, and that Sirianni gave his blessing to get that second interview for sure.
Yeah, and Stats Matt said, my main point is assistant coaches. There's one other opening and four great candidates in my opinion, but the assistants are my worry. And I think that in these interviews, the candidates have laid out who they would bring along as assistants. So if the Colts were concerned that they were going to miss out on these guys, I don't think that would be I don't think they would be taking their time with this. So I do think that the Colts still have plenty of options as far as assistant coaches go. And for deep, when is Steichen interviewing again? He is interviewing on Saturday. Colts are flying out to Philly to do that. But Drake, let's move it along to the one more finalist that the Colts added onto the calendar to make it 8 quote unquote finalists. Now that there's a third round, these aren't really finalists, but they did have an interview with defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn of the Lions. A second interview. What are your thoughts on Glenn? And do you think he's a serious candidate for the job?
Here's the thing. A lot of people look at the stats for the Lions and they're like, oh, 32nd worst, blah, 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 blah. That guy started, I believe it was 4 or 5 rookies on his defense, one of which was Aiden Hutchinson, who might be the second coming of JJ Watt. Okay. So, I mean, you have a very young team. And I believe it was, I can't remember the name. I just wrote a piece on him, but it was a safety who, oh, here we go. Kirby Joseph, rookie safety, led the team in interceptions. He
Mm-hmm.
was tied for first in passes defense from Aaron Glenn, who coached and played safety in the NFL for 15 years. So, look, I first off, I understand why they brought him in. I think he has the traits to be a great head coach. But again, it's this, for me, it's the Wink Martindale syndrome. It's like he's a veteran, kind of that old school style, like Rich Bisaccia. Guys like that, in my opinion, would fit a veteran quarterback better, not a team that needs to rebuild and that probably would benefit from a young offensive mind like a Steichen or a Callahan.
Yeah, I think Aaron Glenn, and I think I've said this on the show before. I think he's a great person. I think he is a guy that really motivates his players, and you saw that young defense really start to come on towards the end of the year. But do I think it's really the right fit for this Indianapolis Colts team? No, I don't. I think there are better fits for where this team is and for what this team needs moving forward. So, but Drake, we've got boots on the ground in Philly. Deep says, I live in Philly, so I'll grab a cup and a string to eavesdrop. Stay tuned. So, hey, Deep, if you hear
Thank
anything,
you.
hit our DMs up. Give us that inside info, and we'll have you be one of our sources there with boots on the ground. Stats Matt says, honestly, Aaron Glenn is much better than the worst option. That defense was much better the last third of the year, and he's a Dan Campbell type coach. And yeah, that's like I said, he motivates players. Players love playing for him. But But I think we're all in agreement here that as far as where the Colts are, I think there are better coaches available that the Colts could for what the Colts need, both now and in the future. And yeah, where's Tom Brady? That man has nothing to do now. He announced his retirement the other day, and he just completely blows us off. We were going to give him a full segment, but I guess we're not going to do that now. We don't need to worry about that garbage.
We had a whole thing planned, but we're just going to remove that part of our script, and instead I'll just say thank you TB12. Moving on there.
Well, let's move on to the important stuff. There was the Senior Bowl is this week, and I wish it could have gone. I had some stuff for the day job that I had to take care of, so I couldn't go down there to Mobile and take it in. But hey, I was still taking in the practice on NFL Plus, so we still got a lot of information to talk about now. Now, when we talk about the Senior Bowl, you're thinking, well, wait, is it just like every other college all-star game? Maybe to some, but for the Colts, that is not the case. The Senior Bowl is huge for the Colts. Drake, tell the audience why it's so big for the Colts and the recent success the Colts have had with looking at players here in the Senior Bowl.
Well, especially Ballard, he really likes guys who take the time to go to the Senior Bowl practices and go and showcase their talents to the other scouts. And if you want to hear, I found too many names over the past 5 years, but I'll just go ahead and give you. Let's see, we got, I think it's 7. Okay, so Shaquille, this guy named Shaquille Leonard in 2019.
Ever heard of him?
Yeah, ever heard of him? Bobby Okereke, same exact year. 2019
or Shaq was a year before in 2018.
Yeah, 2018.
But Bobby was in 19 year.
Yeah, he was 19, and then 2019 also was Rocky Scene. 2020 was Michael Pittman Jr. And then you got guys like Sam Ellinger. You have and recently you have Bernard Raymond, who might be the future left tackle for the Colts, and you have Alec Pierce, who was very high on their radar. So they found a lot of those traits and stuff that they loved at the Senior Bowl practices, and they take a lot of scouts and they throw them down there to make sure that they don't miss any of that talent.
Every player that goes down to the Senior Bowl meets with every single team, and that's what's big is those interviews for the Colts while they're down there. Now, obviously, Chris Ballard isn't down there because he's a little busy conducting a head coaching search, but you've got other guys in the front office down there. The scouts are down there. They're interviewing players. They're watching practices. These guys are going up against other talent that's going to be in the NFL. And it's a good opportunity for them to see how they do against that kind of competition, how they get them in the interview for the first time. This is usually where Brian Decker goes down there to get a gauge on what really makes these players tick and kind of find out what their personality, their traits are. Things like, here, Tom Brady, I'm here and I'm free. Better late than never.
That's right. Thanks, Tom.
But hey, Tom Brady is here, and hopefully here for the rest of our episodes because you don't have anything else to do. So, hey, congrats on a retirement, hell of a career, Tom Brady. But yeah, the Senior Bowl is important. And it's an opportunity for all the teams to gather in one place and watch these prospects. And like I said, I've been watching practice all week. I'm gonna tune into the game on Sunday or Saturday afternoon, excuse me. And there's quite a few, I would say quite a few players in positions of need for the Colts that have certainly stood out. And while it hasn't been the quarterback position, because none of the top 4 quarterbacks have, or even 5, well, maybe the 5th one was down there, but he hasn't been participating. But none of the top 4 guys of Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis, and Anthony Richardson, none of those guys are there at the Senior Bowl. But there's plenty of good quality offensive linemen there that I want to start with. And Drake, I know you had one on your list, the guy that stood out to you. What's that offensive lineman that stood out to you at the Senior Bowl?
Well, it was actually, I mean, they had him as offensive line, but he's more of a tackle build, and that's Darnell Wright from Tennessee. You know, blocking for Hendon Hooker, he did a really good job of having efficient blocking. And look, I really do think that the Colts are probably going to retain Kelly. I don't know if they're going to shop him, but left tackle might be secure. And this is nothing against Will Fries. He's a dog with DAWG. Okay. But you need to not have a repeat. And I'll say this until I'm blue in the face. a repeat of Matt Pryor and Danny Pinter. All right. Whether
Mm-hmm.
you draft or whether you sign, I prefer draft because you could have at least some volume at the position. This is a guy that might even be able to learn the guard spot and push Will Fries for his position because he could perform as an interior lineman as well. He's got a body type that I think could swing a lot of positions, maybe not center. But I mean, I think that the right guard has got to be addressed, and you got to push Will Fries and Bernard Raymond even to earn their starting spots.
Yeah, and then this was a question earlier from Nathan that I was kind of holding on till now. Do you see the Colts moving on from Kelly as center? And if so, do they draft one? I don't think it's a guarantee that they move on from Ryan Kelly, but I do think that they'll probably test the waters. Chris Ballard said that there are going to be changes made to this roster. That happens when you have a team that's 4-12-1. Whether Kelly, who didn't have the best season, is one of those, we'll have to see. But the Colts very well could be in the market for a center, and I definitely think for a right guard. While Will Fries was okay, I think, especially towards the end of the year, you definitely want. I think you want somebody that could hold down that position better. And those were two of the guys that stood out to me. One is Stats Matt's favorite, and Cody Mock from North Dakota State University. The guy has a red hair, has a mullet flowing, missing his front teeth. Just screams the prototypical football player, offensive lineman. He actually played tight end and tackle at North Dakota State, but in the NFL, he projects more to a guard center. He's played both, and he's held his own. But the guy that has really impressed me is John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota. He's a guy that plays center. I think you could probably move him over at guard, but I was watching him in individual drills and then in full 11-on-11 teamwork. Man, that kid is good. That kid holds up his blocks. I didn't see hardly anybody get past him, whether it was one-on-one or the full team. He's a solid lineman. He's 6'3", about 300 pounds, athletic, has some arm length to him as well. I think he would be a great addition to the Colts. I think you could play him both at center and guard. He played mostly center this week at the Senior Bowl. So if the Colts do move on from Ryan Kelly and they're able to keep that pick there in the second round, that top of the second round, don't be surprised if John Michael Schmitz is the pick. I mean, he really impressed, and Ballard loves Big Ten offensive linemen.
Yeah, and the thing is, I was just taking a look at Spotrac, which is a website where they break down the contracts of NFL players. And I mean, Kelly, he's got a serious cap hit. I think it's a $14 million cap hit in 2023, and he's obviously signed till 25. So I mean, boy, if you do move him, that would be one heck of a pick. And you're really going. I think if you do that, though, you need to immediately put less expectations on whoever the next head coach is, because you're taking a rookie quarterback, you're putting him potentially with a rookie center, and you've got a second-year player in Bernard Raymond and a second-year player in Alec Pierce. And if you re-sign Paris Campbell, you're putting him with a whole new quarterback. But man, that would be one heck of a replacement. I really do think that would be worth trading Ryan Kelly for, or maybe even vice versa.
Right. Deep asked real quick. Also interested to see if Chris Strausser, the offensive line coach, keeps his job. I think the only way that Strausser does keep his job is if Jeff Saturday is hired and Jeff Saturday wants to keep him. Otherwise, Strausser is gone, and hopefully that is the case. Chad is here. Hey, better late than never, Chad. Good to see you. And he said, heard a rumor if Steichen comes to Indy, he could bring Minshew with him. Hey, that was in my piece. So go check that out. Go check that out. It sounds like Chad's reading my good work here. So hopefully you're enjoying that. But Stats Matt said, tell you what, though, DeJuan Jones from Indiana he is from Indiana. He's from Ben Davis High School, showed some great one-on-ones and is massive. And he is massive. He is, I think, 6'8", 375 pounds, and he's got an 89-inch wingspan. That's about as the wingspan of Anthony Davis in the NBA. So just an absolute massive human being. He was another guy that stood out. I'm going to round out some other offensive players real quick. At wide receiver, Jaden Reed out of Michigan State and Rashee Rice. Those were a couple guys that stood out. Jaden Reed was doing phenomenal route running all week. Tight end, which I think the Colts are pretty set at tight end. Maybe they might need a little blocking help. But Payne Durham out of Purdue, so some Boilermakers fans, and Luke Musgrave out of Oregon State. Those were the two that really shined to me. But keep an eye on this name. Tajee Spears out of Tulane, a 5'11" running back who has been tearing it up down there. And he's good in all three phases, good running the ball, good catching the ball. I mean, if the Colts are able to snag him in the fourth or fifth round, I don't know if he'll be there by that time. But hey, could be if he makes it to day three, the Colts could get a pretty nice weapon to pair with Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss out of the backfield, and I think he can do some work on special teams as well.
Well, and I think that if you take, especially if you take an offensive minded coach, a three pronged attack would really help a new offensive line potentially with some new rotations or any offense at all, and it would help a rookie quarterback that has downfield options because you could play action and have three different guys that you know are going to attack a defense. You could throw finally downfield to guys like Alec Pierce and show Michael Pittman's frame for once.
And Stats Matt says Spears is my Hines 2.0, and Spears has as might be a little bit bigger than Hines. I don't know if he's as quick as Hines, but he did remind me a lot of Nyheim Hines and what he could do in this Colts offense. So let's move it along to the defensive side of the ball. Drake, who are some guys that stood out to you or that you heard did some good things down in Mobile on defense?
So I'll just for time's sake, I'll go ahead and knock down two. So we got linebacker Marte Mapu, who is from Sacramento State. Doesn't really, ring a lot of bells, but this is an absolute monster at the position. And I really do think that if Bobby Okereke walks, hopefully he doesn't go in the first round, because if he doesn't, I think that the Colts, maybe if he falls a little bit later in the draft, probably because of the college he came from and the competition they faced, that would be one heck of a pickup. And then I'm going to butcher this name, but I'm going to try. It is Adotomiwa Adebawore out of – is that terrible? What is it?
I don't know the pronunciation on that one, so I can't help you out, brother.
But very fair. So this is a defensive tackle, defensive end hybrid out of Northwestern. And I really think that if these are kind of scenarios that if the Colts, I don't think that they're going to re-sign Okereke or Ngakoue. So I think that number one and number two there with Adebawore would be good depth pieces, and put a rookie with Odengbo and Pay. And I'm telling you, he's got kind of a similar style, a little faster, more of that hybrid style. That would be a great depth piece for the Colts.
Yeah, and I do think that edge rusher is something the Colts could look at. The guys that stood out to be were Keon White from Georgia Tech, Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame. I think both of those guys go round one. They're very good. Will McDonald, fourth from Ohio State, a guy that was just a sack machine there for the Cyclones. He's looked good. And then KJ Henry out of Clemson. I think KJ Henry out of Clemson, he's a longer athlete. I think he's around 6'3", 6'4", 240 pounds. But he's been splashing. And if he can make it to the third round, maybe the Colts give him a look there. We'll have to see. But I think what stands out to me about this draft in general is the cornerback depth. There's a lot of very good cornerbacks out there that I think and then I think that's one of the positions of need for the Colts. Might not seem like it, but Kenny Moore could be gone. Kenny Moore could be on the move. Stephon Gilmore only has one more year left on his deal, and he's on the wrong side of 30. Brandon Faison probably won't be back. That leaves Isaiah Rodgers, who's under contract for a couple more years. No, actually one more year, I think, is because he was in that 2020 draft class. So cornerback is a big need. And then you're talking about Julius Brents out of Kansas State, who really played well, has played well over the past few days. Darius Rush out of South Carolina, the guy's 6'2", 195 pounds. Has a leaner frame, but he's got very, very long arms. I think like 33-inch arms. And Chris Ballard, he loves those big, long cornerbacks. So I think a guy that would fit perfectly on the outside. And then someone whose stock has been going up, Caillou Blue Kelly out of Stanford. He's really been fighting there at the Senior Bowl. So those are some guys that I've had my name that have really stood out to me throughout the week in practice. It'll be interesting to see what they do in the game at the Senior Bowl, and then kind of keep an eye on those names once we get to the combine here towards the end of February. See how they perform, see their 40 times, see how they do in the agility drills, because what we always talk about with Chris Ballard, and especially these defensive positions, traits. They love to go, and even on offense, they love to go after guys with traits. So it's going to be interesting. But I think a lot of guys boosted their stock, and I think as far as the guys that I mentioned, they fit the requirements that the Colts are looking for athletically. So, couple names to keep an eye on there. And then Stats Matt says, "I tell you what, if Ringo or Witherspoon slips at corner, going to be tough to pass up for an offensive lineman." And that could be true. I think Witherspoon is probably going to be a first round pick. We'll see what happens with Keely Ringo. He's very raw, but man, he's a hell of an athlete. So, it's going to be fun. We're entering into draft season, Drake. We just need to get off the head coaching cycle. And hey, it could be that maybe it's Monday, maybe it's Sunday, maybe we have a surprise episode, but I think we're close. I really do think we're close to finding the next head coach of the Colts.
We're getting there.
I really don't see it going. I think we'll know sometime next week. Well, if it's Steichen, it won't be official until after the Super Bowl, but I think we'll know if it's Steichen sometime next week. So we'll have to see. But hey, that's our show for tonight, guys. We went a little longer than usual, but it's because the chat was just flowing. We had a lot to talk about tonight. Stats, Matt, Deep, Chad, Wyatt Law, Nathan, JB, you guys were absolutely killing it tonight. Congrats to Tom Brady on retirement. Thanks for joining our show. But hey, I'm going to say it one last time. If you haven't already, please go ahead and follow us on all the things. Go ahead and like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook. Go ahead and follow Colts at Colts on FN on Twitter. Go ahead and subscribe, like the episode, and hit that bell so you know when Drake and I are going live. Drake, as we wrap up the episode here, what's some things that you're working on for the site horseshoehuddle.com?
Well, actually, it's very relevant. Are the Colts taking too long to pick a head coach? So go read that and complain about it. Either side of it, you're right.
Yeah, I put a piece up. Was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday morning. On a free agent from each one of the finalists that they could bring along with them from their former team to the Indianapolis Colts. So go ahead and check that out. And you know what, guys? I mean, with all the head coaching stuff happening, we forget that Jonathan Taylor just had surgery. So should Colts fans be worried about that surgery with Jonathan Taylor? I'll have a little bit of insight coming out on that either tomorrow or this weekend. But until then, go follow Drake at D Walster Drake. I'm at Andrew Moore NFL, and we will be back Monday night. Unless there is a breaking news for this head coach, we will be back Monday to talk some more Senior Bowl and recap where we are at in this head coaching cycle. But until then, have a good one.